I don't know if I believe in ghosts though.
I think there's something, I don't know what though. But it could just be in people's heads.
Like they're projecting their own fears.
Just when you're tired and stuff and, you know, you kind of see things that are there, but you kind of change them in your mind. It's like when you see like a photo of the moon and you think you see a face like in the rocks or whatever, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I
can't remember
or
what
the
it's
uncanny
called.
valley thing of like
Yeah.
somewhere, like you see a plug and it looks like a little face, but it's like at what point on the scale does that land? But then you think it could all be electrical signals anyway, so
Just
so
like
this seems
leftover energy when it comes to ghosts and stuff.
maybe. Well, it just like this feels like, okay, that's a table, that's a mug. It's quite stonery, but like it's like you say, when you get tired and it all gets distorted and everything, you're starting to see everything differently. It's like, well, that's just, was the thing before like the most clear, or is you're processing the signals like differently, like they're coming through? Like, what if the tired way is the way all the time? Or like dreams don't make sense to me either, and there's so little knowledge on them.
Yeah.
Like that they're meant to be processing your daily life, but then why do so many people think that they've imagined stuff they've not seen? That's what's so strange.
Is it then
about
your daily life kind of filtered through your personality and imagination? And because when we say daily life, we're thinking about it as in, you know, we get up and we eat breakfast, but it could also be all the thoughts that you have in a day and all the kind of
subconscious
things
stuff
that you imagine, like daydreams as well, if you know what I mean.
Or like when you're about to go to sleep and you hear like chatter that isn't like coherent. Do you ever get that where you're hearing yourself say things that don't make sense?
It's like when you're waking up as well and you can't work out if you're sleeping or if you're awake, and you're kind of in that in between, kind of, you know, rising up.
But it's like, if all that's happening, then how much can we trust of like what? I don't know. I guess it's just trusting if other people around you are like, oh, I see that mug as well. That's all it is just trusting what other people are seeing.
Yeah, well, it's like people who have insomnia as well. Like what we were saying there about things kind of being contorted. Like when you're on that lack of sleep, everything just starts to get a bit funky.
Yeah, I had that in February. It was just wasn't like as bad as some people I've known, but it was like, it really messed me up. Like, just couldn't.
How long did you have it for? Just like a month or?
About that. And it wasn't crazy bad, but it was like enough to make me like not be good.
You lose your mind, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I had it last November. Oh,
Yeah.
That's an ice cream man. I had it last November, kind of end of October into start of December, and you just, by the end of it,
I don't hear any ice cream man. It's in your mind.
Yeah, by the end of it, you just you've lost it, like, because you're just in such a lack of sleep. Your mind just can't function in the way that it's supposed to. Yeah,
and then I don't know if you found that the less you sleep, you're so exhausted during the day, and then you get into the habit of going on the pillow, and your heart's beating so fast, and you're so awake, and it's a very eerie thing of like, you need to sleep,
but you can't.
And you just can't. It's like, why am I like? It doesn't make any sense. Sets you up to be more alert. It's really strange.
Yeah. Were you writing it all during that period, or no?
No, I'd actually written it way earlier. So I think I started writing like 2019.
Wow.
It was kind of after me and Chris did the slow weather stuff. Had come back from London. And
was that around the same time you did the EP as well? Or it came out in 2019, didn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, my EP came out then. I had an EP of my own stuff that came out then.
Yeah.
And then we went to go record Clean Living, the Slow Weather EP. And then after that, it was kind of like, oh, cool, here's a space to just start writing something that does not exist. Like, I always kind of knew I wanted to do a second album. That's always been on my list of, like, want to accomplish that. But I had no real framework for what it would look like. And, after that, it was, like, quite an inspiring and also stressful time. So that just led to, like, oh, I'm going to write some cool new things that don't need to sound like anything, you know?
It's interesting, too, because I remember reading that 10 of the songs came before COVID.
Yeah.
Whereas there's a lot, you can now kind of draw a lot of, maybe not parallels, but you can hear certain lyrics that you think, oh, this feels like it is quite related to what we've gone through in the last year.
That is one of the first things I thought was, oh no, people are going to hear Cocoon and just think that I've written this very obvious song about like blank walls staring at me. It's like, it came from, I was already feeling a bit just a little bit isolated at times and a little bit kind of, where am I going next with things? And I was tutoring a lot out of the flat, like tutoring singing, and that was really lovely, and I really like my students, but you don't see a lot of folk if you're in the flat working from home. So it was starting to be a bit, not what I was used to with retail jobs, starting to get to me a little bit. So I think a lot of the songs actually came out of that, and I wrote them in the flat as well, which added to that. And then the pandemic happened. So that was a weird turn of events.
Did that experience of starting to feel those feelings of isolation before COVID make it easier or harder when the lockdown hit?
Well, it's a good question, because at times I felt just so unprepared, like worse, just like all my usual kind of neurotic tendencies, they were just kind of like heightened by the uncertainty and feeling a bit trapped. But yeah, maybe in a way, until the second lockdown, that really knocked me out. But the first one almost felt like, okay, maybe I can get through this. Like once I got over the kind of idea of this is going to go on for a long time, I accepted it deep down, and then kind of that made it a lot easier. So maybe in a way that did kind of help. I'm not like a super extroverted person either, so I feel really bad for folk who they really feel like regenerated with lots of people around them. Like they were deprived of that, and I was also lucky to be with my partner. You know, folk that were on their own, like it was hard for everyone in lots of different ways. But I really feel for folk who were getting through that just like isolated by themselves.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like you can't. Well, I think you were allowed in some capacity to kind of go and see people if you were on your Yeah,
and it was different stages at different points, wasn't it? It was like some like following all the rules and just making sure that each stage you were kind of trying to loosely like do what was mandated. But yeah, I guess it was just a really strange time, wasn't it? And it's funny, like you'd think that the best thing to do is just sort of just move on, just don't pretend it didn't happen. But in a way, it is going to be there, and I think it's maybe healthy to kind of not dwell on it all the time, but just remember it happened so you can process it, you know?
And you need to try and learn from it, or else it would feel like a wasted experience.
Exactly. If you don't have any reflection or any growth, then like, what was the point of it? What was the point of all of it, you know?
A fallow year.
Hey, I wrote that before. This is what's so annoying.
What was the one song that came during the pandemic?
Can you guess it?
I thought it was going to be Fallow Year, to be honest.
It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? But no, genuinely not. It was a song called Valley, which isn't very
It's quite escapist
sounding.
though.
Yeah, it was sort of based on a memory, and you know, sometimes those songs are like patchworks of different things. It's not like this song is literally just about that. Sometimes it can be remembering one memory and then combining it with something that's come to me like a revelation or just an imagined thing. Valley's like a mix of all those things, and it's more just like a feeling. But yeah, it's a feeling, but also remembering all the traveling I used to do, like lots of gigs and lots of valleys and scenery, and yeah, a lot of that's in it as well.
Is it the song that has the line about swimming in the past as well?
No, I think that's Collector. And I think that Collector, I'm quite proud of the way that turned out, and I know that the folk who worked on it, they quite like it as well. I think Chris quite likes it, because it just feels, I don't know, like it just, everything came together, like the strings and the band playing, and in a way it's quite open and sparse, but also quite long and big as well. It's like 6 minute songs, so it's like, yeah, I quite like that one. I think other songs I hear, and it's that classic thing, there's still stuff I could have done better, and I can still hear the flaws, but
as long as you did what was the best you could have done at that point in time.
No, that is a really good point. It's remembering that, yeah, we kind of got that done during a pandemic, you know, again, within the restrictions, but we did achieve that during quite a tricky time. So that, yeah, thanks for that. That's a good point.
When did you record? Because the last time we spoke was October last year, maybe? What shape was the kind of record in at that point?
So by that point, all the songs had been finished, and I was really lucky enough to get funding through Creative Scotland, which just really unlocked a lot of possibilities. It meant that we could record primarily at Chem 19 Studios.
Very good studio.
Yeah, like intimidatingly nice. Really nice kitchen as well.
That's what you want.
You want a good kitchen. You want a good bass. Yeah, it felt like it was going to happen, and yeah, we recorded a lot of the core stuff in October. So that was like the drums and bass and a lot of the lead vocals. And then all in one day, like most of the strings. Just thinking about
crazy.
it was it was a day or maybe a day and a half for like pretty much most of the strings.
The thing is with the strings is that they quite often take on different roles in each song. So in some songs there are these kind of swells that elevate what you're doing, and in other songs it's more of a call and response thing. How clear an idea did you have of the role that you wanted the strings to play in each song when you bring them in to work on it for a day? How mapped out do you have it?
So really, Rona McFarlane, who's also an amazing singer-songwriter in her own right, she is responsible for like arranging those strings, and Rachel is also great. She did cello, but Rona arranged and played all the strings that you hear. So it was a case of I knew which songs I wanted to have strings on. I knew the kind of atmosphere and mood I wanted created in each track. So, a lot of references for that. A lot of songs I liked that had strings, but also, like Chris would bring forward some stuff like Serge Gainsbourg strings, or
very nice.
Or he loves Beck's Sea Change album, which has some beautiful string arrangements on it, and I'd work out at what point I wanted to bring the strings in. For example, if you listen to Collector, it's like you have them and then they drop out, and then you have them again as this riff that returns, and then other ones, they don't show up for ages. I think Tropic, it takes a while for them to really kick off, and it just kind of leans into it. But yeah, so I did have a plan, but I would not have been able to arrange those strings. Like, it was Rona that had the expertise and the knowledge, and just she worked really hard on drafting loads of stuff, and then we'd go into the studio, and Chris was really good at getting the best performance, so making sure it was played as well as it could be, but also, like editing a little bit. So what that part maybe doesn't work quite well there, now we have the band, let's try this differently. And again, that's extra credit to Rona, because she just went with it. Like, I don't know if it's a classical background thing, but there was no grumbling, there was no like, oh, you want me to do it again? Like, she was total pro, like just did it, no complaining, like worked so super hard in such a short space of time. So that was quite inspiring, actually, because I can have mini breakdowns where I'm just like, I can't play, but she I'm really proud of the strings on it. I'm really glad we got those.
I think that's the thing with this album as well, and we've kind of touched upon it a little bit, is that it feels like you've built a really strong team around you with Chris and Rona, and we mentioned Juan as well, I think.
Again, Chris is responsible for pretty much most of that. I brought in Jack and Gavin, who play with Kitty, and we're in Harry and the Hendersons and bands like that, really great musicians. But yeah, Chris knew Juan from other things, and had worked with Rona before, and Connor did Pedal Steel, again, had worked with Chris, so was lucky that Chris brought some great guys on board, and it meant that I wasn't worried about, are we going to have folk that aren't going to get it, or just, you kind of know that they're going to do a good job. It's more about getting it as close to what you had in mind as possible.
How long does it take you to feel comfortable with someone like that in the creative space, in the studio space?
Weirdly, doesn't take me that long. I mean, maybe we got really lucky. Maybe it's because I like everyone. Like, genuinely think everyone's was really easy to get on with and really chilled out. But maybe there is something about me where if I sit down with one other person, I'm a lot more comfortable. But if I was to walk into a room with 10 people, or even less, to be honest, like maybe 6 or 7, like I start to freak out. I don't know if I start to like go more into myself.
Especially if you are the kind of center of attention, it's your record.
Oh yeah, it's a lot. it's a lot. So in a way, we didn't have everyone in at the same time, all big live. It was like structured. We'd have Gavin and Jack one day, and we'd have like Juan doing his keys another day, and
I guess that also kind of allows everyone their individual space to shine, like, because you can focus on people's individual parts more easily that way. Yeah,
definitely. And there was a lot of honing in the studio, especially for the drums and bass, where Chris really likes to get the core right to begin with. We don't agree on everything all the time, by the way. There's times where, you know, like I maybe would have gone a different way, but he's the producer there. Like that's his job, and you have to kind of go with that. And you can end up with something better than you imagined if you trust that producer. But yeah, a lot of time on just crafting the bass and drums, making sure they were solid and like just felt really big. Yeah, so that was sorted. I'm trying to remember what the question is. Yeah, I think I'm like forgetting what we're talking about.
Can't remember either. Well, I was going to ask though, how did the dynamic with Chris compare on this project to Slow Weather? Like when you're involved directly as collaborators to the artist-producer relationship, is it similar because you've worked together previously?
Yeah, there were some similarities. When it works really, really well, it can almost feel like you're just speaking the same language, and you know, if it's going well in an evening, Chris is so productive, and if the atmosphere is just what you need, like he can just create loads of different parts really, really quickly, and it just flows. It's just and you listen back the next day and you're like, wow, it really captured something. But you're not going to have a good day every single day. So there were times where it was so difficult. Slow Weather felt easier because I wasn't producing and playing on everything like Chris was, but also this is my baby, you know, these are my songs, and for some stuff to change and evolve, or also to get to points where you realise I'm not playing this part well enough, or this vocal maybe needs to change and I'm not willing to do that. Those are moments where you have to decide, is this a personal thing where I'm just getting caught up in my own ego and I can't let go of it, or actually, I have a vision for this and I kind of need to stick with this. There's a lot of back and forth in your head and making sure that you're following the right path. And we got there, but oh my God, sometimes it was really difficult. And I think after not really gigging, not really recording for so long, it was even more difficult being around people and just doing a lot of work in a concentrated amount of time. But when it went well, it's magic. Like that's why it's worth doing, because you just feel like you are creating something that literally didn't exist, like sonically. And if you're pushing yourself and you're challenging yourself, like that's kind of the whole point. Otherwise, you're just never going to move forward, and you're never going to improve on what you already do.
Well, that's interesting too, because when we look at this album in comparison to your first record, were there any certain ideas or aspects of it that you wanted to return to and kind of explore further?
I wanted that full band sound. I've worked on other things, like I did a much more acoustic EP with Chris called Spectral. That is way more bare, no drums. I wanted to return to a full band sound because I think that's what the songs needed. But in a way, I didn't want to just recreate what I did on that album. I think in some ways, maybe there are elements of that album that were, I don't want to use the word better, but maybe there are elements on that first album that were strong, but I didn't want to just recreate it. I wanted to bring in new influences that I have, and, you know, I'd listened to production by folk like Kate LeBon, Aldous Harding, and I'm not super fans in that I can't name every single song, but I'm big fans of them, and I just would hear the way they'd write and produce and be like, that's really distinctive and unusual, and I wanted to just try and push myself. And I don't think I've come close to what I could have achieved in that area, but I know that I've written in ways that I wouldn't normally have approached.
And you've taken steps forward.
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully.
Because like when you then, if you were to look to return to that on another album, you then build upon it further. You know what I mean? Yeah,
exactly. And I don't know where I'm going after this. I always had the second album in my head. So in a weird way, if that's what I do, that's what I've done, and I'm not going to feel regret if I don't do any more. But you're right, it's a good milestone to have achieved things that I've wanted to do for a long time. Like I've wanted to work with strings for so long, because they're just so moving and beautiful. And like you say, they can be such a different character on each track. You can really use them in such creative ways, and it can make a song that sounds very simple and kind of, you know, maybe slightly uninteresting. It can really elevate it in so many ways.
But then how do you ensure that you're not using them as a crutch at any point? Like, do you have to get the song to that point of strength first before you bring them in?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's why they came they came later in the Chem 19 sessions. Like, this was before we went to Green Door in November. But that's why the songs, I would go over the songs so much to make sure that I was happy with them. It wasn't like with other things I've written where sometimes the songs would just come out fully formed and I was like, I'm happy with that, it feels right. There were some songs on this, like Cocoon, oh my word, that nearly didn't go on the album. That
still feels very organic though. Like, it doesn't feel like something that's kind of been laboured over and torn through and through. It very much feels like something that kind of just unfolds.
Good, because it was. Nah, I'm so pleased though. Like, there were so many things about Cocoon that, again, it's almost like a trial and tribulations thing of, it's the work was worth it. A, it didn't really go on, and B, it just took me so long to get it right and so long to write it, and it used to be double tempo, and I changed all the lyrics so many times, but yeah, it got to that point of when it feels organic, counterintuitively, when it feels organic and natural and everything, even after all that work, that's the point it's ready. You want it to sound as fresh and new as possible, and there was something Chris did in the mix that just completely flipped it into like, this might be one of my favourite songs now on this album. How did that happen? And you just think, this is what's so cool about writing and recording, is it can be so unpredictable. But yeah, it was it was good.
Did you learn anything? You know, we were talking about how there was a slight antithesis to the Spectral EP and that they were very stripped back and you wanted this to be more full band. But did you learn anything from that EP in terms of keeping these songs to feel more organic?
Yeah, it's like knowing when to do it. And there are times maybe on this album where it could have maybe even gone more organic. But it's not being afraid of laying things bare, if that's what the song demands. It's all about following the song and what will do the song justice. And that takes years of failing and years of like kind of getting it right to have an instinct for when that's appropriate. I think, for example, the track Soho, I knew that was going to be piano and strings. I knew that for a long time, and I didn't think it made sense to add anything else because it's very much telling the story, and I wanted the lyrics to really be at the forefront. So that felt right in the end.
What is your relationship to Soho as a place?
Again, I sometimes struggle to talk about songs because they can be a amalgam of different things, but I went to Soho when I was in London with Chris. Chris wasn't there, but I went to see the Eurovision going on.
Nice.
Because it was in May. And I was like, you know what, that'd be quite fun. I normally watch it with my family and kind of just get drunk and have a good time watching it. So why don't we actually seek it out?
I don't think I've ever watched Eurovision. Was that the year we got 0 points though?
It could well have been. We get close to 0 points every year, so
we really succeed in being the most hated country in Europe.
Damn right. That's how it should be, to be honest.
With Cocoon as well, it feels like quite a questioning opening. I mean, literally, you are asking questions in that song. What do you feel were some of the big questions you were trying to ask and find answers to with this record?
Probably questions that I've been asking myself for a long time, but also more positive questions as well. I can tend to fall into a much more pessimistic approach to thinking about things, but you know, it's the usual things of purpose and anxiety and that kind of, it can lead to inertia where you just feel like you can't go anywhere, like, and then but there's also questions about, okay, well, if that's the case, then there must be some kind of purpose, there must be some path, and even if it's not the path you thought it was going to be 5-10 years ago, what are the new paths now? Or just taking stock of quieter, calmer moments as well. And it's very easy to attach loads of meaning to the most visceral, scary, upsetting experiences because they are so intense. But it's also, when you get a little bit older, you do kind of appreciate the calmer moments as well, because you can get a lot of clarity there. And I think some of the tracks, you know, Fallow Year is literally just me repeating a refrain over and over, because the more I'd repeat it, the more I found meaning in it. I think it's almost like in
It feels like it ties into the phrase too, though, because this idea of a fallow year where nothing, really happens. It's this idea of repetition, every day being the same.
Yeah, exactly, and it's not an upsetting song or like a depressing thing. It's quite a sweet melody. It's quite bittersweet, and it's quite comforting, and there can be good and bad in that, and it reminded me of, on the Slow Weather track, Clean Living. I think I did the exact same thing. I'm using the same trope if I repeated the pattern. I think it was, how did I, that this happened to us, or it was something along those lines.
Yeah.
And I think the more we repeated it, the more that it gave that meaning. And I want the listener to get whatever meaning they want from that. That's what it should be.
It's kind of different too, though, because in the Clean Living, it very much builds and builds and builds as you're repeating it. Whereas on Fallow Year, it kind of remains intimate the whole way throughout to a certain extent.
Yeah, and I think that was a natural way to end the album, because there are points in the album that do get quite expansive, but I needed it to just almost end like a whisper. I just always had that in my head. I wanted to just fade out without fanfare, and also without any kind of intense ballady emotional thing. Like, I wanted it to just be very, very plain, very understated. And I remember when we were recording Fallow Year, is exactly what you were saying about, I thought it was about the pandemic, because when I was sitting in the studio, I'm remembering this now, it's all coming back to me, I remember almost crying a little bit, and like nearly crying, because it meant something really different to me than it did when I wrote it. Obviously.
Was that at the end of the process too?
No, this was at the end of, close to the end of the Chem 19 sessions, before Green Door. But I was very tired at this point.
I can imagine, yeah.
Really tired, really like, are we going to get this done in the time we have? I don't know. The guitar, I think, was 1 or 2 takes, and the vocal for that is a guide track. So if it sounds rough, it's because it is rough, that song. But again, it's like deciding to leave it. Some people might listen and go, that could have been recorded or played better, and they're probably right. But to me, it felt natural and felt like it's just what it needed. So,
what part of the recording process felt like the most emotionally intense?
When I got to the studio piano and the keys were so heavy I couldn't play it. That was a bad point, and that led to, shouldn't be saying this in a podcast, I'm revealing too much about this process, but Juan, God bless him, learned the piano parts and played them.
Well, is it tracks 1, 7 and 8 I think he's credited on?
Yeah, and then Soho, I play that, but Juan's helping work the pedal for that one, because I was playing these songs, and albeit not perfectly or the best, but there was this particularly robust old piano that needed tuned as well. We had to get a guy in to come and tune it mid-session.
Is this a Chem 19?
Yeah. But in a way, it's like it ended up with Juan playing them, and Juan's a fantastic player, so it could have gone a lot worse, sometimes the disasters can lead to lovely moments where it actually worked out okay.
Yeah. What was the role of Green Door in the process then too? What did you go there and do afterwards?
So we did a lot of the overdubs there, a lot of backing vocals, which I really enjoy backing vocals, because you can just really have fun with it and layer things up. And
the hard work's kind of done at that point as well, I guess, too, really. Yeah,
I wanted to make sure the songs were layered enough. I still had this huge list of things I wanted to get through, just made this big chart, and I was like, we need to get guitar here, and I want to get more keys here, and let's get more synth there. But yeah, ultimately, if you don't get that little bit of synth in that particular song, the world hasn't ended. But yeah, Green Door was about backing vocals and little bits of guitar, and I think it was pedal steel as well. Those are the main things.
Yeah. When you listen to the narrative to these songs too, do you feel like it's more about yourself or more about other people than your previous work? Because there's a lot of kind of you and he throughout, kind of referencing people, which was quite interesting to me.
I think it is quite a me album. I think that I would love to write something that was much more of the folk tradition, where I was, processing things around me and talking about other characters and other people, or just imagined characters. But this was a very confessional, inner thought, kind of just processing a lot of my own stuff, my own experiences. It's very me, and you can kind of take it or leave it with that. But yeah, if someone listens to it and goes, well, I see myself in that too, then that's great.
You said too that the song Tropic always brings you a bit of comfort. Why is that? What is it about that song that kind of gives you that feeling?
I think it's the chords. The chord progression's just really gentle and lilting. I remember when I wrote it, I'd been to a festival the day before. I just remember being so inspired that day. So when I wrote this song the next day, this was one of those songs where I think this one actually came out nearly exactly how I wanted to write it. This was really quick, this one. It's the chords and it's the way the band play on it. It just feels weirdly 90s, and I love the Rhodes on it. And some of the songs, if you don't get them right from the beginning, then you've no hope. I think Tropic, for some reason, just felt really comforting and warm, and just how I wanted it right from the beginning. So it almost didn't matter what we layered on it. At the beginning, it felt right.
Why is that? Why is it that from some songs you kind of need to get them pinned down in that initial burst?
Because it's almost like getting what's in my head out onto the arrangement. It's almost like I sometimes feel like if I was a writer, I'd be someone who had lots of ideas, but maybe would be really bad at writing it down and implementing it. Almost sometimes what I'm trying to capture and what I hear, I maybe am not as great at playing it or getting it out there, and it's sometimes a struggle. But sometimes when I know I've captured it just right, I'm like, that's great. Or ultimately, if it's even better than I could have imagined, I'm like, did not even think it could be that good, then that's when I know it's like how I want it. You know?
When you're in a period of heavy writing and heavy creativity, do the ideas feel quite related, or are they often quite scattershot?
Both. Some of the songs, you'll hear they're kind of in the same key, like I'm maybe playing the same position because, you know, maybe subconsciously I'm recreating it but putting my own spin on my own song, which sounds weird, but and then other times
almost like you're covering your own idea.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any shame in that. But if you get something you're happy with and doesn't overtly sound like a copy of it, if you get away with it and you maybe don't even notice for months, but then other stuff, not at all. Other stuff, it just existed in that moment, and I didn't really think it was recreating other things I've written. I remember writing a lot of them on coffee. I don't like coffee. I hate it. It makes me jittery, and I used to use it when I was at the post office to try and get through a Saturday morning, to try and get to like 12 when the post stopped. But I went through a phase of just being in the flat, this was before the pandemic, of just having some coffee, and then I'd get like half an hour of like, whoa, everything's amazing, ideas. And even if they're terrible, like I got them down, so that worked well. I don't think I could do that now. I think that would be a bad idea.
What's your coffee intake at these days?
Zero.
You can put it.
Not doing it. Even I'm such an old lady, but even with tea, it's mainly decaffeinated now. I just can't handle it. Just doesn't work for me, but really. What about yourself? Do you drink much coffee?
Yeah, I'm not as bad as I used to be. I mean, during the pandemic, I did go through a phase of being on like 10 cups a day.
How did your body function?
I was just drinking coffee all the time. Like, I would finish one cup and then go make another.
Were you not constantly in the bathroom?
No, just don't break the seal. But now I'm down to like 3 cups a day, maybe a little more.
And
I've got decaf. Decaf's a good substitute. Because I like drinking coffee late at night, but you can't drink caffeinated at that time.
So you don't feel jittery on caffeinated?
Oh, no, I do.
You do? You just love it?
I mean, I'm jittery anyway, so fuck it.
Just really lean into it. My mum used to drink a lot of coffee. I don't think she does as much anymore, but yeah, I don't think I inherited that. I just, it's almost like it's too much. It's like being, because I know it's a drug, right? but it's almost what I imagine being cocaine is like, of that, wow, everything's incredible. Oh, I'm
That's
going to
what
write
it
an
says,
opera. I'm
innit?
going to write an
Coward's
opera.
cocaine.
And then, and then like a few hours later, my stomach feels weird and I'm crashing and I'm irritable and I'm like, why have I done this to myself? Why have I put myself through this?
Are you quite conscious of that? Like, because I was thinking about this the other day in terms of, you know, what you intake, whether it be food or drink, and how that kind of relates to your mindset and your mental health and your creativity.
Yeah, this year, yeah. Not as much before, but this year I've had to work hard to take better care of myself, which is it's been an adjustment, but I just needed to do it. It was just really important.
Did the insomnia trigger that when you kind of realize how important something like sleep is?
Yeah, that and other mental health issues. But I've always had what feels like sort of bad anxiety, and I had it for so long that it felt like just part of my personality. So I'd not really pay as much attention to it as I should have. Whereas again, now slightly older, it's like I can kind of moderate what makes me more anxious or what puts me in a worse place. Where I can at least try and moderate it. Like, I don't know about you, but like obviously having a drink away was great, but I used to drink so much more. Like everyone did at uni though, I think. Everyone just went for
Yeah,
it
that's what uni's for.
yeah, it's to get really drunk all the time. I don't know, yeah, I'm just trying to take active steps and taking more care of myself. It's so boring. It's so boring to sit and talk about it. It's
Do you
not
find it
very
makes a
rock and
difference
roll.
though?
Yeah, it does, especially if I get really bad. It's almost like you have to take militant steps to look after yourself. Otherwise, like, it can be quite high and low. Like, you know, if you do drink way too much, or if I drink way too much, coming back from that can just take way longer than it should. So yeah, just trying to just trying to get enough sleep is such a priority at the moment. And you know, I kind of wish this has happened later in life. I wish I'd gotten to 50 and gone, oh, I should maybe take care of myself now. But it's happened earlier than
It's
I
probably
thought.
better to start earlier though, in the long run. You don't think?
Maybe, but I'm also jealous of folk that can do like 3 nights in a row drinking and then kind of be all right after it. Like, that looks quite fun.
Yeah, I don't get hungover.
You don't get hungover?
No.
You bastard.
But I think the older you get, the more you realise that's maybe not the gift you thought it was, because you can kind of just drink as much as you want with no real repercussions, which isn't, especially when I started working in a bar, I've kind of realised that maybe isn't the...
Do you see a
God
lot of
gift I thought
stuff
it
in
was.
there?
Working in a bar?
Yeah.
You see a lot of funny stuff, yeah.
Like what?
Just when people are drunk, it definitely makes you think more about when you're on a night out, not getting too away with it. Because when you see someone who's more drunk than everyone else, it's not pretty.
They're not on the same plane anymore.
I imagine it'd be good if you were a songwriter though, because there's so many characters and stuff that come up to you. It'd be quite, I don't know if it'd be inspiring or not.
Maybe I'll just go solo to bars and sit in a corner with like a cigar
notebook.
and a notebook, just surveying, you know.
Did you never find that when you were like working at the post office or anything? Was it inspiring in any way? Did it give you space to think? Or nah, maybe not.
Maybe someone who's more curious and less neurotic, maybe. But I just remember a lot of older folk complaining about stamps and complaining about this price of the stamp going up by like 2p and being like, it's 2 pence, though. It's not that bad.
Send an email.
Yeah. So I
Don't even have to pay for stamps.
You old guy. No, I mean, yeah, maybe in some ways, I was inspired to sort of be more creative, actually. If I was doing a retail thing all day long, I'd want to go do a gig or I'd want to go write something. Yeah. I think the way you're talking about it, though, is quite cool. I think I would like to be more curious and to kind of watch the people around me. And, you know, do you know like Andy Schauf? Like,
yeah. Well, his last album pretty much all took place in that bar, didn't it?
Yeah, I think it did. Was that the Neon
Skyline?
Neon Skyline. And then the other one, the Party concept album, it's just such a great way of writing about people, and it was just so vivid, like the way you described everything. That was really cool. I'd love to challenge myself and write in a much less self-absorbed way and actually write more about characters and story. That'd be cool.
You kind of do the same thing though, but in an internal way, like on songs like Valley. Like they're very directly kind of writing down particular feelings of a memory.
Yeah, I think so. And I try not to, sometimes I can be really literal and I don't hold myself back from doing that on the album. When I want to say something really directly, I just do it. But then other times it is a bit more cloaked in imagery and what I'm trying to evoke of my surroundings, you know. I think there's a lot of nature stuff on there. There's a lot of, natural surroundings and water and then there's also a lot of like night van is just from the perspective of being in a van at 4 a.m, just feeling like you're going insane. You know?
I wanted to ask about that one because it's spoken word, but it doesn't feel like a song that you would normally write that you just kind of transcribe to spoken word. Like, it's more, not complex, but the sentences feel elongated, perhaps, and the rhythm of it is more like a walking pace. There's no real melody to it. It kind of just unfolds. How did that one come together in comparison to the way that you would normally write a song?
I wrote that passage of words, like I wrote that all in one go. It's funny, talking about how some of the songs took forever and others didn't. Maybe it was like 50-50. Maybe some of them actually did come out all at once, and then other ones were just much more painstaking. But for Night Van, I just wrote it all down there. It just all came out like a poem, but just came out exactly how it was. And I just knew that if I kept that exactly how it was, it would help me remember how it felt in that moment. So I didn't want to edit it too much. The production is so much down to Chris, what he achieved. I had a little organ thing on the shitty keyboard that I'd done, so I had the chord progression. But then everything you hear, like, you know, he did chimes and he did guitar loops and he took my voice and like layered it all these different ways. And the way he panned it as well was really creative, just kind of, yeah, again, it's almost like I'll have the idea and I'll have the song there, but Chris will just really lift it into something that's like, yeah, just really interesting and unusual. And he's also not, he didn't go like, we're going to make this sound like this thing over here. Like he just started getting inspired, you know, for Night Van. So yeah, I'm pleased that I did something I wouldn't normally do. I've never done spoken word or poetry or anything like that really before. So it was nice that I made it on the album.
At what point making this record did you get the great sense of joy?
I had a few different moments of joy. The strings day was great. We were all tired at that point, so to hear beautiful strings coming out of the speakers was like, this is great. It's just what we need right now. That was lovely. The night me and Chris sat and listened through each song, even if there was one, we did a little bit in March. But in November, when we sat and listened to it and it was like, 80-90% done, it was sitting there like, wow, okay, I feel so relieved. Joy is maybe not the word. I felt joy when it was mixed and mastered, it was all done. It's maybe not healthy. I felt joy when it was finished, closure. But I felt like relief and I felt emotional when we sat and listened through it in the order that I'd imagined. That was a really cathartic moment. It was really nice.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Well, no worries. Thanks so much for having me. It's been good.